Good evening, everybody. Continuing with our reading of the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, we were going through the second chapters or the second lesson where Rich Dad or Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad is talking about why financial literacy is important. We had stopped at a place where it was told that we all need to look in the mirror and be true to our inner wisdom rather than our fears. We should not be afraid of taking risks. We should not be afraid of acting on our dreams and visions. We should not be afraid of failing. We should do what is truthful. We should do what is necessary and we should listen to our inner wisdom. We will continue from where we had left yesterday. By the time Mike and I were 16 years old, we began to have problems in school. We were not bad kids, we just began to separate from the crowd. We worked for Mike's dad after school and on weekends. Mike and I often spent hours after work just sitting at a table with his dad while he held meetings with his bankers, attorneys, accountants, brokers, investors, managers, and employees. Here was a man who had left school at 13, who was now directing, instructing, ordering, and asking questions of educated people. They came at his beck and call and cringed when he didn't approve of them. Here was a man who had not gone along with the crowd. He was a man who did his own thinking and detested the words, we have to do it this way because that's the way everyone else does it. He also hated the word can't. If you wanted him to do something, just say, I don't think you can do it. Now, pay attention to what's happening here. By they were 16 years, by the time they were 16 years old, Mike and Robert did started having problems at school. The problem was they were not getting along with other kids. They were not getting along with other kids because they wanted to spend more time discussing with Mike's dad and working at their job and understanding about money. Excuse me. So, as Mike's dad was just taking care of his business, these two boys would sit with him and observe what he was doing. Now, they noticed that Mike's dad had left school at the age of 13. Now, he is managing a lot of educated people who will follow his instructions. He did not go along with the crowd. He did not do something because everybody wanted to do it or everybody was doing it. So he did not like the words when somebody said, we have to do it this way because that's the way everyone else does it. If you tell him that you can't do it, he will make sure he will do it. Now, he did not like when somebody would tell him, you have to do it like this because everybody else is doing like this. He needed an explanation, a logical explanation as to why you have to do something, and telling just that everybody else is doing it the same way would not be enough. Mike and I learned more sitting in on his meetings than we did in all of our years at school, college included. Mike's dad was not book smart, but he was financially educated and successful as a result. He told us over and over again an intelligent person hires people who are more intelligent than he is. So, Mike and I had the benefit of spending hours listening to and learning from intelligent people. But because of this, Mike and I couldn't go along with the standard dogma our teachers prepared, and that caused problems. Whenever the teacher said, if you don't get good grades, you won't do well in the real world, Mike and I just raised our eyebrows. When we were told to follow set procedures and not deviate from the rules, we could see how school discouraged creativity. We started to understand why our rich dad told us that schools were designed to produce good employees instead of employers. Occasionally, Mike or I would ask our teachers how what we studied was applicable in the real world or why we never studied money and how it worked. To the latter question, we often got the answer that money was not important, that if we excelled in our education, the money would follow. The more we knew about the power of money, the more distant we grew from the teachers and our classmates. Now, see, something happened for them, something happened with them. As they started becoming more and more aware about money and they started getting more education about money, they started realizing that school was not giving them the real world education. The teachers would tell them that you have to get good grades, otherwise you will not do well in real world. They were already doing well in real world. Now, school encourages you to do things in a particular way. If you deviate from the set rules, then there would be problems. But The real world requires you to come up with solutions which are creative, which are innovative, which will help you to deal with the problem as per the problem and not according to what you think the solution should be. So, as there was disconnect between what they understood about money and the real world and what was being taught at school, they started slowly going away or getting distanced from their teachers and their classmates. My highly educated dad never pressured me about my grades, but we did begin to argue about money. By the time I was 16, I probably had a far better foundation with money than both my parents. I could keep books. I listened to tax accountants, corporate attorneys, bankers, real estate brokers, investors, and so forth. By contrast, my dad talked to other teachers. One day, my dad told me that our home was his greatest investment. A not too pleasant argument took place when I showed him why I thought a house was not a good investment. It disturbed the perception. There was a difference in the perception between my rich dad and my poor dad when it came to their homes. One dad thought his house was an asset and the other dad thought it was a liability. I remember when I drew the diagram for my dad showing him the direction of cash flow, I also showed him the ancillary expenses that went along with owning the home. A bigger home meant bigger expenses, and the cash flow kept going out through the expense column. Today, people still challenge me on the idea of a house not being an asset. I know that for many people, it is their dream as well as their largest investment. And owning your own home is better than nothing. I simply offer an alternative way of looking at this popular dogma. If my wife and I were to buy a bigger, flashier house, we realize it wouldn't be an asset. It would be a liability since it would take money out of our pocket. So here is the argument I put forth. I really don't expect most people to agree with it because your home is an emotional thing, and when it comes to money, high emotions tend to lower financial intelligence. I know from personal experience that money has a way of making every decision emotional. When it comes to houses, most people work all their lives paying for a home they never own. In other words, most people buy a new house every few years, each time incurring a new 30-year loan to pay off the previous one. Even though people receive a tax deduction for interest or mortgage payments, they pay for all their other expenses with after tax dollars even after they pay off their mortgage. My wife's parents were shocked when the property taxes on their home increased to $1,000 a month. This was after they had retired, so the increase put a strain on their retirement budget and they felt forced to move. Houses do not always go up in value. I have friends who owe $1 million for a home that today would sell for far less. The greatest losses of all are those from missed opportunities. If all your money is tied up in your house, you may be forced to work harder because your money continues blowing out of the expense column. Instead of adding to the asset column, the classic middle class cash flow pattern. If a young couple would put more money into their asset column early on, their later years would be easier. Their assets would have grown and would be available to help cover expenses. All too often, a house only serves as a vehicle for incurring a home equity loan to pay for mounting expenses. In summary, the end result of making a decision to own a house that is too expensive in lieu of starting an investment portfolio impacts an individual in at least the following three ways. Now you have to pay attention to what has been told. Buying a home is a big dream for everybody. Everybody wants to buy a home, everybody wants to have their own home. But it comes with loans. It comes with loans that you will pay for the next 25 to 30 years. It comes with property tax. It comes with other taxes. It comes with maintenance. A lot of expenditure goes from your pocket when you have invested on a home. Instead of that, if you build an investment portfolio, you would be better off, is what Robert Kiyosaki talks here. So, home versus investment portfolio will impact in three ways, is what he says. And let us see what are the three ways which will what are the three things that will get impacted by buying a house versus going for an investment portfolio. Number one, loss of time, during which other assets could have grown in value. Number two, loss of additional capital, which could have been invested instead of paying for high maintenance expenses related directly to the home. Number three, loss of education. Too often, people count their house and savings and retirement plans as all they have in their asset column. Because they have no money to invest, they simply don't invest. This costs them investment experience. Most never become what the investment world calls a sophisticated investor. And the best investments are usually first sold to sophisticated investors who then turn around and sell them to the people playing it safe. I'm not saying don't buy a house. What I am saying is that you should understand the difference between an asset and a liability. When I want a bigger house, I first buy assets that will generate the cash flow to pay for the house. My educated dad's personal financial statement best demonstrates the life of someone caught in the rat race. His expenses match his income, never allowing him enough left over to invest in assets. As a result, his liabilities are larger than his assets. The following diagram on the left shows my poor dad's income statement. It is worth 1,000 words. It shows that his income and expenses are equal while his liabilities are larger than his assets. So if you notice, if you have the book with you, you can see that the educated dad or the poor dad's income statement showed that income and expenses are more equal, but assets are lesser compared to liabilities. My rich dad's personal financial statement on the right reflects the results of a life dedicated to investing and minimizing liabilities. So if you want to become rich, your income statement should have more income than expenses, and your balance sheet should have more assets than liabilities. That means what you spend should be less than what you earn, or you should be earning more than what you spend, all expenses put together. And what gives you money should be more in your balance sheet than what takes money from you. Right? Why the rich get richer? A review of my rich dad's financial statement shows why the rich get richer. The asset column generates more than enough income to cover expenses, with the balance reinvested into the asset column. The asset column continues to grow, and therefore the income it produces grows with it. The result is that the rich get richer. Why the middle class struggle? The middle class finds itself in a constant state of financial struggle. Their primary income is through their salary. As their wages increase, so do their taxes. Their expenses tend to increase in proportion to their salary increase. Hence the phrase the rat race. They treat their home as their primary asset instead of investing in income producing assets. This pattern of treating your home as an investment and the philosophy that a pay raise means you can buy a larger home or spend more is the foundation of today's debt ridden society. Increased spending throws families into greater debt and into more financial uncertainty, even though they may be advancing in their jobs and receiving raises on a regular basis. This is high risk living caused by weak financial education. The massive loss of jobs in recent times proves how shaky the middle class life really is financially. Company pension plans are being replaced by 401k plans. Social security is obviously in trouble and can't be relied upon as a source of retirement. Panic has set in for the middle class. Today, the mutual funds are popular because they supposedly represent safety. Average mutual fund buyers are too busy working to pay taxes and mortgages, save for their children's college, and pay off credit cards. They do not have time to study investing, so they rely on the expertise of the manager of a mutual fund. Also, because the mutual fund includes many different types of investments, they feel their money is safer because it is diversified. This educated middle class subscribes to the dogma put out by mutual fund brokers and financial planners: play it safe, avoid risk. Now, in the previous section that we have studied so far, in the recent section that we have studied so far, Robert Kiyosaki is talking about the lessons that he got from his rich dad. He talks about the assessment of his poor dad's balance sheet and the income statement, so as with the rich dad's. So in his poor dad's income statement, he see that the income and expenses are almost same. That is, He's spending as much as he is earning, but his assets are lesser compared to the liabilities. That means there are very few things which are giving him money, and there are many things which are taking away money from him. Whereas the rich dad's income statement shows more income compared to expenses and more liability, more assets compared to liabilities. So there are more things giving him money, which will make him pay off all the expenses, and he is left with surplus money to reinvest back in assets that will give him more money, and this goes on. That is why he says the rich become richer. The rich become richer because they buy things which will pay them back money regularly. They buy assets which will increase their worth in terms of the returns they get, and they manage their liabilities lesser than the assets. Their income is always kept at a higher level than their expenditure. So, this happens only with proper education. Otherwise, the middle class continues to struggle. All right. And as the middle class started becoming more and more needy of getting higher returns, they started investing in mutual funds, which says the experienced fund managers will manage your funds and you will get safe higher returns. So is that good or bad? We will see. The real tragedy is that the lack of early financial education is what creates the risk faced by average middle class people. The reason they have to play it safe is because their financial positions are tenuous at best. Their balance sheets are not balanced. Instead, they are loaded with liabilities and have no real assets that generate income. Typically, their only source of income is their paycheck. Their livelihood becomes entirely dependent on their employer. So, when genuine deals of a lifetime come along, these people can't take advantage of them because they are working so hard, are taxed to the max, and are loaded with debt. As I said at the start of this section, the most important rule is to know the difference between an asset and a liability. Once you understand the difference, concentrate your efforts on buying income generating assets. That's the best way to get started on a path to becoming rich. Keep doing that, and your asset column will grow. Keep liabilities and expenses down so more money is available to continue pouring into the asset column. Soon, the asset base will be so deep that you can afford to look at more speculative investments. Investments that may have returns of 100% to infinity, $5,000 investments that are soon turned into $1 million or more. Investments that the middle class calls too risky. The investment is not risky for the financially literate. So, what is Robert telling us? He says, start working in such a way that your income is more than your expenditure. That means the other way of looking at is reduce expenditure to keep well within your income. And whenever you are spending the surplus income that you have, spend it on buying assets and not liabilities. So, more assets will make you get more income, and you push back the surplus income back to buying assets. Your assets will become deeper and deeper, and soon you will have enough assets which can take care of your life, and you will get the opportunity to take the deals which will give you higher returns, the investments which will give you higher returns, those investments which normally the middle class will not think about. The normal middle class thinks about such investments as too risky, but those are the investments that the financially literate people can make, which will give them very high returns. So much so that a $5,000 investment growing up to becoming $1 million investment, or even more. So, if you do what the masses do, you get the following picture. Income will be dependent only on the salary. Expenses goes to the government in terms of taxes. Assets will be nil, and the liabilities will be mortgage. That is, you will be spending too much on servicing the loans that you would have taken. As an employee who is also a home owner, your working efforts are generally as follows. You work for the company, employees make their business owner or the shareholders rich, not themselves. Your efforts and success will help provide for the owner's success and retirement. You work for the government takes its share from your paycheck before you even see it. By working harder, you simply increase the amount of taxes taken by the government. Most people work from January to May just for the government. You work for the bank. After taxes, your next largest expense is usually your mortgage and credit card debt. So you are working for the company that you have a job with. You are you are working for the government by so that you pay the money that you earn in terms of taxes. You work for the bank because most of the money that you earn you pay to the bank as repayment of loan. The problem with simply working harder is that each of these three levels take a greater share of your increased efforts. You need to learn how to have your increased efforts benefit you and your family directly. Once you have decided to concentrate on minding your own business, focusing your efforts on acquiring assets instead of a bigger paycheck, how do you set your goals? Most people must keep their job and rely on their wages to fund their acquisition of assets. As their assets grow, how do they measure the extent of their success? When does someone know that they are rich, that they have wealth? As well as having my own definitions for assets and liabilities, I also have my own definition for wealth. Actually, I borrowed it from a man named R. Buckminster Fuller. Some call him a quack and others call him a genius. Years ago, he got architects buzzing because he applied for a patent for something called a geodesic dome. But in the application, Fuller also said something about wealth. It was pretty confusing at first, but after reading it, it began to make some sense. Wealth is a person's ability to survive so many number of days forward, or if I stopped working today, how long could I survive? That is the definition of wealth according to Fuller. That is, if I stop working today, how many days can I survive at the same level that I am surviving today? That is the definition of wealth. Unlike net worth, the difference between your assets and liabilities, which is often filled with a person's expensive junk and opinions of what things are worth, this definition creates the possibility for developing a truly accurate measurement. I could now measure and know where I was in terms of my goal to become financially independent. Although net worth often includes non cash producing assets like stuff you bought that now sits in your garage, wealth measures how much money your money is making and therefore your financial survivability. So, this difference between net worth and wealth is very important. Net worth will tell you what is the worth of the things that you own, but wealth will tell you how much money is the money that you have is making. So wealth will tell you how long you can survive. Net worth is only giving a picture of how you are looked at today. Wealth is the measure of the cash flow from the asset column compared with the expense column. Let's use an example. Let's say I have cash flow from my asset column of $1,000 a month and I have monthly expenses of $2,000. What is my wealth? Let's go back to Buckminster Fuller's definition. Using his definition, how many days forward can I survive? Assuming a 30-day month, I have enough cash flow for half a month. When I achieve $2,000 a month cash flow from my assets, then I will be wealthy. So while I am not yet rich, I am wealthy. I now have income generated from assets each month that fully cover my monthly expenses. If I want to increase my expenses, I first must increase my cash flow to maintain this level of wealth. Also, note that it is at this point that I am no longer dependent on my wages. I have focused on and been successful in building an asset column that has made me financially independent. If I quit my job today, I would be able to cover my monthly expenses with the cash flow from my assets. So, an easy way of understanding how to know whether somebody is wealthy or not. Now, the example that Robert gives here is if my total expenditure is $2,000 and my income is $1,000, if I have $1,000, I can survive for 15 days. That is my wealth. If I can make $2,000 every month from the assets that I have built, then I can survive the whole month. Next month also my assets will give me $2,000. So even if I quit my job with my expenses limited to $2,000 a month, I will be able to survive if my assets are giving me $2,000 a month. So that is the definition of wealth. My next goal would be to have the excess cash flow from my assets reinvested into the asset column. The more money that goes into my asset column, the more my asset column grows. The more my assets grow, the more my cash flow grows. And as long as I keep my expenses less than the cash flow from these assets, I grow richer with more and more income from sources other than my physical labor. You see this? With excess income, you push back into the asset column that will give you more income, and you push it back into the asset column that will give you more income. Now, that keeps on increasing your wealth irrespective of whether you are working or not. So, your assets are taking care of your life whether you work or not. That is being wealthy, that is being rich. As this reinvestment process continues, I am well on my way to becoming rich. Just remember this simple observation: the rich buy assets, the poor only have expenses. The middle class buy liabilities they think are assets. So, these three should be the thing that you have to remember as we end the session today. We are closing the chapter 2, financial literacy. Why is it important? And the end of this chapter, end of this lesson, you have to remember these three things and try to become rich by buying assets. The rich buy assets, the poor only have expenses, the middle class buy liabilities they think are assets. So, how do I start minding my own business? What is the answer? Listen to the founder of McDonald's in the next chapter. We will listen what the founder of McDonald's has said in the next chapter that we will start tomorrow. So let's conclude for the day. Let's conclude for the day. Go to sleep with these three things in mind. The rich buy assets, the poor only have expenses, the middle class buy liabilities they think are assets. Think about this and determine in your mind to keep your expenses lesser than your income and have your assets more than your liabilities. Let's meet again tomorrow at the same time, 10 p.m. Become stronger, become more capable, and work towards national development. Let's all continue to become stronger and stronger and make ourselves capable of contributing to the welfare of the nation and to humanity. See you all tomorrow. Good night.